Faith is a relationship. Now, if you really want to have a relationship with somebody, you have to get to know who they are. I don't mean that you have to collect a bunch of facts about that person as if you were going to read their resume and really have a relationship with them, or read a dossier about them, or spy on them from a distance. That's not really having a relationship. When you want to have a relationship with somebody, you ask them who they are. And you don't just collect the data. In asking who they are, what you're really doing is making space for them in your life. They become, over time, a part of who you are. A relationship, a genuine, especially a loving relationship, stretches us. And so, as we've been talking about stretching our faith the past couple of weeks, you can see that what I'm getting at is that our relationship with God stretches us, stretches who we are. It doesn't insist that we leave ourselves behind or play some phony role so that we'll be accepted. Instead, we become more truly who we are in a process of stretching by being in relationship. Faith involves asking again and again and again who God is. You know, I've been married to my wife Joy for over 37 years, and I gotta tell you, I'm not the same person I was 37 and a half, 38, 39 years ago. I don't mean by that I'm phony or I was phony back then. I mean by that by being in relationship with Joy, I've become more than I was back then. I have become more myself than I was back then. That's not faulting who I was as a younger person. It's admitting that souls were created to grow through relationships, specifically to grow in relationship with God. You know, I wouldn't have kept growing, I don't really think, either in my relationship or individually with Joy, if I hadn't kept an open mind and an open heart to who Joy is. Joy and I have been on some great adventures together, I'll tell you. She's called me on some of my stuff. And, you know, I've called her on some of her stuff too. She's believed in me when I've had cockamamie ideas, and I've believed in her when she has wanted to do some stretching herself. That's what it means to love each other, to go on the road together and to become more together than we were before. At the heart of that is that I'm always asking, who are you? Enter more fully into my life so that I can know you better, you can know me better, and in that process, we become more than we were before. Now, the analogy between us and God and Joy and me, that's not a perfect analogy, but what does carry over in that analogy is that faith is about always wanting to know who God is. Never shutting down our curiosity about who God is. Never assuming that we already know who God is and there's nothing more to find out about God, that there's nothing more for us to become. In our relationship with God, we've committed ourselves as faithful people to being stretched unto eternity. That brings me to something that I want to talk about today in the Bible, and it's specifically St. John's Gospel. And, you know, that's the favorite gospel for lots of us Episcopalians. It is for me. And one of the things I especially like about that gospel is that it contains the 7 I am statements. Jesus says, for example, I am the bread of life, or I am the light of the world, I am the gate, I am the good shepherd, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus says, I am. Now, that may sound as if what Jesus is doing is saying, here are the list of things I am, and once you get those memorized, you're all done. But I think that there's something significantly more to it than that. I think instead, Jesus is teaching us to constantly ask, who are you? Who are you? Let me know you better, even if it means my soul, especially if it means my soul must be stretched to make more space for you. The I am statements are, as I said, a mark of the Johannine gospel. And it's important to know that in Greek, you can just, and I'm just going to use the English words here, just bear with me. In Greek, you wouldn't have to say I am, you could just say am, right? There are modern languages in which you can do that. You just use the verb. But Jesus says, I am. He doesn't just say am, he says, I am. And John shares that with us to make us think back to the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew scripture specifically that I'm thinking about is Moses at the burning bush. You may remember that God said to Moses, go set my people free. And Moses said, well, when I go tell them that God's sending me here to set you free, who am I supposed to tell sent me? How am I going to get them to believe me? And God said, tell them, I am sent you. Just before that, God had self-identified this way. I am that I am. That can also be translated as I will be what I will be. I am. I want you to think about that for just a moment. It's almost like God says, I am, and then whatever predicate you add will never be enough. It will never exhaust who I am. I am always more than you could possibly imagine. Don't put me in your boxes if you really, really want to know me. Think about your relationships with other people. As soon as you put them in a box, you might just stop listening to them. You might fail to learn about depths of who they are. If you're not surprised by somebody ever again, do you think that you've really just exhausted who they are, or do you think you've just lost your curiosity about them? Or you've lost the desire to know them more deeply? If there's a deep mystery like that in every human being, just imagine the depth of the mystery in the person of God. The I am statements in John's gospel teach us not only this is who God is, once and for all, and once you know all of those different concepts, you're done knowing God. Instead, they teach us to be persons of wonder. Wonder about God. Always prepared, even though it can be a little scary, to be stretched in who and what we are. It's common to say that Jesus came to reveal God, and I believe that that is true. Jesus came to show us who God is. But what we learn in John's gospel is that Jesus also came to show us that God is more than we're ever going to get our hearts and heads around walking this terrestrial planet of ours. God is more always than we knew today. I'm going to tell you one more story from the Hebrew scriptures, and then we'll call it a day. Do you remember when Moses used to talk to God, right? Moses on Mount Sinai says, "Hey, show me your face." And Moses hears from God, "Well, you know, if I show you my face, it'll undo you. So I tell you what, I'm going to put you in a cleft in these rocks, and I'm going to pass you by, and all you're going to be able to see is my back." right? I'll pass you by and you can see my back. Lots of interpreters over the ages have said that what that means is this. However it is that we think about God, we're always kind of a step or two behind. We're always catching up to who God really, really is. There's more. There's more to know. To be faithful, to really want to have a relationship with God, is to really yearn to be stretched, so that God will make more space within our lives, within our souls, within our hearts, and within our minds for God to dwell.